Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Chicago 4, where we spotlight leaders and innovators here in the city of Chicago. Antwan from Showtime Ward here alongside my good friend Brian. Brian, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great today, Antwan. Really excited for this interview. I love to hear more about the simple good.
Today we have an amazing individual. Her name is Priya Shah. Just to give a little information about Priya and what she's been able to do here in the city of Chicago and globally. Priya Shah, founder and executive director of The Simple Good, a non-for-profit organization that connects the meaning of good from around the world to empower underprivileged youth to become positive activists in their communities through art and discussion. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you guys an amazing person. I've gotten a chance to work with her off scene and seen the work that she's done. And we're just going to continue to promote beautiful people in the city of Chicago. Without further ado, Miss Priya Shah. Priya, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Antwan. Thank you guys for having me.
Great to see you. And we always start with the same question with amazing leaders: is how did you get your start in this, Priya? And what's your founder story?
Oh man, that's a long one, but
We got all day. Just
yeah, I'm sure every founder story is just as long, but kind of just summarize it. This is our 10-year anniversary, so I'm definitely reflecting on this journey. Thank you, quite a bit. But I did founded the organization 10 years ago, and it really was inspired by my travels from around the world. I grew up as an artist. I did a lot of poverty alleviation work all around the world. I was in India, South Africa, Brazil, everywhere. And that is really where I learned what it means to learn and teach resilience, which really profoundly impacted my life and the things that I had to go through growing up. I'm a woman in this world, right? I'm a woman of color, and I'm born with one hand. And so early in my life, I felt a lot of different levels of oppression from a lot of different directions. And it was only witnessing other forms of resilience that I really learned what it meant to overcome. And what I learned was actually when I was during my time at Mother Teresa's orphanage, where I really witnessed children that had been through so much within a short period of time on this earth, and yet they had the ability to see beauty in other people and around them in the simplest way. And that's really what fueled their resilience, because they really knew that good did exist in the world, and therefore this is a life worth living, and it is also important for us to create good. And it really made me realize that what am I complaining about, right? There is a lot of inherent good that's within me. There's a lot of things that I could do with the assets that I already have around me. I realized I'm an artist and I can use that to make other people happy. And if that's a small thing that I can do, that is what I will do. And that really shifted my whole trajectory of who I was and what impact I can make in the world, and really listening to what I was rather than listening to people telling me what I'm not, right? And I just felt that we don't teach kids this in back home. Like, I never really was taught that. And I realized that a lot of people around me were not taught this. So I was really motivated and passionate at a very young age to try to bring this understanding to other kids that are just like me, right? That quickly written off just because of what I look like. And in order for us to advance each other, we have to really understand the good within ourselves. And so that was kind of the onus and presence, kind of the inspiration of what drove The Simple Good, and for me to start a photography blog that really expanded the conversation. It was just a conversation between me and a few friends. We started a photo blog which asked people to share their meaning of the simple good in their lives. It started with 54 photos of our own, and then we asked the world to participate, and it just went viral all over the world. And now today we have thousands of photos where people have shared their stories of their simple good, and we actually use that to teach kids about different perspectives of good from all around the world to fuel their understanding of the simple good. So this has been a very organic, long movement and journey of starting the organization.
Wow.
Wow, it's an amazing story.
Yeah.
So my first question would be, obviously, you talked about in the past, and based on us working with each other, your organization caters to underprivileged youth on the South and West Side and all over the city. But I want to know what is the effect of art in those underserved communities, and what more do you feel like needs to be done so that there could be a brighter scope painted on art to have those discussions about what's going on in those communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think art is an inherent tool of all of humanity, right? It is something that we all are driven towards healing, towards understanding, towards dialogue, and we just actually don't recognize that much, right? It's almost like, oh, I'm not an artist. That's a very common term, but humans are all artists because we all have souls, and that is the language of art. Art expresses what the soul is feeling, right? And so that is really what I think that we need to really own a little bit more in our communities, is understanding that we all are artists, and it is our responsibility to create in order for us to really express and evolve our souls, which allows us to advance our development and express who we are. And that's really the function of art, right? Is to advance our humanity. And so when it is ripped away from communities, it is a form of control, because now we don't know who we are, and we kind of follow things that might not be healthy for us as an individual and our evolution as a people. And that's why art is really controlled, right? That's why we want to take away art from places that you want to control. If you look at the history of humanity, that's the first thing that's always taken away, because then rules and regulations follow that. We really have to own into art in order for us to advance into who we are. And once we can do that and really know who we are, all these other means and resources that surround us make sense. And we can actually be independently advancing, and I think that is what's not talked about, the power of the art, and like how that really develops ourselves to be human. And that's why I think that us using art as a vehicle really is a profound tool to really understand the simple good and get our kids to sit in that and develop on their own, and then express that to the larger community of what they've learned about themselves.
Break it. I totally agree. I mean, we've been killing the arts in schools and just going math and science and English overload without any art. But break it down. You're working in a lot of schools. How do you get in there? Is it out of school time? Is it after school? Is it in the school day? What's the curriculum, and what do you try to help students create?
Definitely. So we are both in school and after school. So we will take over an entire exploratory period or an art class, or we'll be there after school meeting with students. And we implement art residency programs. So we're there anywhere from a full semester to a full year, meeting with students two times a week to 4 times a week, implementing our curriculum. We bring in our teaching artists, all the art supplies, everything that's needed to complete the program. And then it ends with a final art showcase where we do either on-site or off-site of the school. So if it's off-site, we invite different community partners like corporations, art galleries, universities to host our students to do a public art exhibition where they publicly display their artwork and share their meaning of the simple good and how they'll use it to change the world. So a lot of schools approach us for this opportunity because we're a social emotional learning based organization, and we fulfill that hourly criteria while bringing the arts. We're one of the only organizations that's an SEL-based visual arts program in the country. So we're really hitting two birds with one stone, right? Two needs that are very critical for every school, or actually any childhood environment, and being able to bring that to spaces in a very unique way.
I'm Brian, sitting in a high school, and I'm a sophomore, and in comes the artist in residence from the Simple Good. What will they have me do in that class in day one or day five or what have you?
Yeah, so the structure of each class is similar. We're just hitting on different topics every session. So we're walking in and opening up with a meditation, really teaching our children, how to leave everything outside the classroom and let's focus on right now, right? What are we feeling and where we're at, so we can really take in the simple good. And all our meditations are focused on that notion of how do we find good right now? What does that really mean within us? Where is that sitting inside of us so that we can express that today? So we're setting that tone from the very beginning, and then we're opening up into a bit of dialogue, really reflection, and getting our students to kind of explore a little deeply about what they felt, or really understanding a prompt of what we're putting in front of them. And then we're diving into the arts process so that we really have something that we're going in with mentally before we start creating. I think that's sometimes why art is overwhelming, right? You're like, I don't know what to do, because you don't really have set that inspiration that's inside of us. And so that's kind of how we're setting each session up, and it's building into creating a larger body of work, which will then be presented at that final showcase. So it's a very deep reflection based approach to creating art. We're not just doing projects, we're really getting kids to think about themselves, thinking about one session is about the simple good within us. Then we're focusing on the simple good all around the world and using the blog. Another session will focus on simple good in our community. What can we find outside right now that's good? And then really bringing all those understandings together to create work together. And for us, it's not really about creating an amazing Picasso. It's art for us is the courage to create. Just for us to create something together and be able to reflect and tell a story about it that will connect to another human being. And that is your power of being an artist.
So I want to know, with these programs, working with the inner city youth, and also you also the program has reached a global scale. We've had programs overseas. Can you just talk about? Do you think the program that you've had both here in the States and overseas, did it have some sort of effect on how students view other cultures and other societies? And just talk a little bit about that, because anytime you introduce something new to students, sometimes you get that drawback. They're not quite sure, not quite comfortable. But talk a little bit about how, though, your program has been able to kind of change the students' view on life and other cultures around them.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think that's the most powerful part and unique part about our program is that we're really focusing on global competency. And I think what we find generally in society is that we're afraid of the unknown, right? Whether it's people, it's places, anything. But what it needs to happen is that we have to have cross-cultural dialogue happen at a younger age. What's happening right now is that it's always happening as an adult, right? Or later on in life when we've already formed a lot of assumptions and fears about things that we're not comfortable with. But when you have that intersection at a very young age, now there's a connection that's not built with fear, and it also becomes a part of your identity. And so as you grow up, all your decisions and the ways that you view the world now incorporate this identity of a connection that you've made to. And that's why empathy is so important. And so for us, when we're doing work all around the world, we are literally having virtual or physical art exchanges with our students in these different communities. One, for them to see different ideas of artwork. Two, to understand different ideas of simple good, which are actually the same, right? And so when our kids see our student simple goods from East Africa and our student simple goods in Chicago, it seems like two very different places, and they realize, oh wow, both of our simple goods are friendship. Both of our simple goods are love. Both of our simple goods is peace. And this also allows our students to understand and reflect about the context of what both set of children are going through, and that we're not alone in some of the challenges that we face. You know, we did work in East Africa with children. There were children of formerly abducted child soldiers, and they did an exchange with our students in Inglewood, both confronted and faced with a lot of challenges of violence in the community, but they found peace within each other's stories. And they also understood that, wow, we aren't alone in the struggle, and maybe I should do something more for my community. And so it creates accountability in addition to cultural connection. And by the end of every exchange, our students want to go to each other's countries, right? So it's like a very beautiful thing that I think needs to happen more regularly in education and just who we are as a people, to really interact and engage with one another so we can stop othering each other, you know, later on in life.
I love how you say that you bring this in at an early age, because you start to, you're just, I know from working with young people, it's like they're open, their apertures are much more open, right? They're willing to engage, and they make friends so much faster than we do as adults, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're giving hugs to everybody, and that's a beautiful thing, right? And we should really take advantage of that time to intersect in a really pure, beautiful way. Because what you see in leadership right now is a reflection of folks being isolated and surrounded by the same types of people. And now, as they're growing up into power, they're all still going back to that same type of people. And that, in the reality, is not the world, right? We have to understand the scope of the world in order to truly survive it and allow it to thrive.
I also love how adolescents start to ask big questions. Who am I? What's my purpose? What is this world I live in? And I love how your art really gets at that core question we all ask, but you start asking as a teenager is like, why am I here? What's good? Is this,
Yeah.
let kids wrestle with it in a beautiful way.
Yeah, and what I always say is that we actually know who we are in a very young age. These
Yeah.
are gifts and inherent truths that we are born with, and we know what we naturally are driven towards, but we aren't taught to move towards that. And so later on in life, we get really lost and confused about like, wait a minute, am I supposed to be an accountant? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that if we actually taught individuals who they were, we actually will have more peaceful, happy societies because now we're moving in this direction of purpose that actually serves not only ourselves, but others as well.
Schools are not very liberatory places, though. They can also often be very repressive and oppressive.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the main location where you're doing your work. How do you partner and sort of be a little bit subversive within those spaces, but also partner in good faith with people who got to deliver this system, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're bringing in our teaching artists that are trained in our program, but we're also partnering with schools that want to achieve mutual goals, right? That's the only way that you're going to be successful with anything. So, really being in spaces that maybe they don't have any type of programming like ours, but they really want it or they want to get there. And so, together as a partnership, we can move towards that more successfully. And I think also what's important is that we also train our schools on our program. So they themselves can benefit from it as an individual so that they know also how to implement and better support our students to achieve this goal of all of us finding our simple good in our lives and continuing to advance that, exploration even when we're not in the classroom together.
So the big question for me, and this is a question once again that I ask to a lot of our guests is, what do you hope your legacy is for the Simple Good, and where do you see the Simple Good, the organization in and of itself, moving forward within the next, let's say, 5-10 years from now?
I think what the saddest thing in the world right now is that no one believes that good exists, right? And so I hope that this legacy that we create is that one, it does exist and it exists within ourselves, and it's our responsibility to create that every single day. And that's the only way that we can coexist and be in amongst community with each other. A lot of the problems that we see today, it seems so overwhelming, but it's really not. It's about these everyday nuances of goodness that we create rather than negativity, right? We can be rude to people. We can just kind of do these really petty things, but it actually has a larger impact of frustration and lack of hope. And it is our responsibility to create that hope every day. And I think that's truly what I hope that our organization represents and creates inspiration towards so that we can coexist and live in peace with one another. And this has happened in the history of the world before. It's not an unusual thing, but we don't talk about these examples of how people have come together and really thrived as a community. You're always hearing about it being divided. So I hope that is what, we can show and continue to represent, and people can manifest that on their own as well. And we hope to bring the Simple Good again around the world. Before the pandemic, we were able to do this work everywhere. I was teaching the Ministry of Education in Croatia about the Simple Good, and it was such a beautiful movement. And in the next 3 to 5 years, we hope to be not only in Chicago, but outside nationally, and then also begin our reach internationally as well, and really create Simple Good Hope hubs around the world so that we can really facilitate that cross-cultural dialogue through education on a regular basis.
Your process reminds me of, I don't know if you've heard of these folks, the Asset-Based Community Development Project. I think it was John McKnight and Jody Kretzman started, but from an artistic lens, because you're cognizant of inequality and injustice and racism and oppression, but you're also balancing like there are all this wonderful good inside us and in the world, and to fight that process, you have to be able to do both, right?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, I think that thing is when we talk about some of these dialogues, it becomes hard for people to swallow because it becomes a hopeless conversation, right? And I think what we have to understand is that there is a lot of hope when we just put in love with everything that we do, right? And that means even when we have to have these tough conversations, it has to happen with love. that I am invested in connecting with you, and I am invested of you being a part of my community, but I also need you to bring that to me too, right? And allowing this to be a process with each other of creating that hope and healing, right? And I think that creating space and using art to create that space really manifests in a really beautiful way that creates a legacy of reflection. Like I still look back at some of our students' artwork from the past, and I'm like, man, that was even deeper than I thought, right? And that's the power of art, because it sits with you in different times of your life in a different way. And I think this is a tool that we need to better utilize for a lot of these discussions that we're still trying to figure out.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, I just have my last question would be, just tell me a story about of a young person who inspired you with their art in the recently or whenever.
This is always such a hard question for me because there's so many. We just started doing some interviews with some of our, Simple Good youth ambassadors, and one of their parents also joined us, who's also a teacher at one of our schools, and they've always been such a huge advocate of the Simple Good, and amazing cheerleaders. And during the time that I was actually teaching the class at the time, the student was in sixth grade, and now she's a senior in high school. And I never realized how much of an impact this made on her until we had this interview. And she told me when she came into the class, she was really to herself. She was in depression. She was on the path of cutting herself. And her mother was also getting emotional just thinking about, the things that she was going through at that time. And she said she walked into the classroom and a lot of her artwork was very dark and, reflection of where she was at. And she heard all these notions of simple good, of hope. And she realized that, there was actually good things around herself, even when she did feel uncomfortable. And that even when things got hard and she didn't understand, that hope did really exist. And it really shifted her artwork into a lot of lovely, bright, colorful images. And her mother started noticing that. And it also allowed her to shift how she saw the world and how she started behaving. And so it was very fascinating because I did realize that she was really quiet, but she was so enthusiastic by the end of the program. I did not realize that this huge transformation was happening right in front of my eyes. And so it's just a beautiful thing to see that this has impacted her so much that she now wants to work at the Simple Good when she graduates college. And she's really passionate about supporting other children that might be going through similar types of experiences at a young age, to allow them to see that, there is hope in their lives. And, this is how you can find a simple good. And it's just so amazing, and I'm not even doing the words justice to explain when that emotion, when you hear these things, because it shows that, this is a really powerful thing that we all need to be taught. And this is how it shifts behaviors and potentially saves lives.
Oh, that's so. And we've seen the rates of mental health and challenges with teenagers has gone sky high in kids the last 10 years. And I know from working with young people when I was doing it every day, you could see it. We'd have young people give speeches, and mental health became like a third of or half of all speeches when the pandemic happened. So I think your work so addresses the mental health crisis we're having in this crisis. So we have to get Simple Good in every school and neighborhood. So how can we help? What should people do who watch this? How can they help out?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Please donate to allow us to meet the demand. Since the pandemic, our work has increased by 200%. There's a huge demand for our programs just because of everything you said. Social emotional learning and mental health in schools needs to be addressed, and there's not enough resources to bring that to school. So we are committed to meeting that need, because honestly, everything that's happened is going to impact us for many decades to come unless we address it right now. Correct. And so we would definitely need everybody's donations and support and partnership in general. We are committed to reaching as many schools and communities as possible. So if anybody watching this sees that there is a need, an opportunity for partnership at their community, please let us know and reach out. And then we're always just looking for partnerships to help the sustainability of the organization. We work with a lot of different companies and organizations that support our work, and we're all about collaboration. So would love to welcome any partnerships that might be a good fit for us.
And a website for people to donate, to volunteer. What's that website for us, Priya?
Yeah, everybody could go to thesimplegood.org/donate, and at thesimplegood.org you can find all the rest of everything that we do as an organization, and get some more details on how we can bring it to your community.
Priya, we cannot thank you enough. I feel if you were ever to be, to be a president or any sort of office, you got my vote. Okay? You got my vote. All right. I knew you were an amazing person. I knew you've done amazing work beforehand. But to listen and to see just how the effect that it has on young people, and as you said, starting them young and being able to allow them and give them space to be able to use art to communicate not only what they're going through, but what they see on a day in and day out basis is what we need more of here, not only in the city of Chicago, but around the world. But for Chicago 4, my name's Antwan, Brian Brady, Priya. Thank you guys so much. If you want more information on the Simple Good, we'll have a link on our YouTube page as well as a Facebook page that me and Brian, we've been talking about starting. Brian, we have enough videos. I believe you're like our 10th video, Bria.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool.
You're like our 10th
Oh, it's
doing very leisurely, but we definitely appreciate all the work, everybody that's been tuning in, and just continue to show us love. And guys, thank you so much.